Hi everyone, this is Veronica with Sew It Seams, and welcome back. Today in the Dear Jane quilt journey, we are going to be looking at the block I-5, which is also called Maria's Majesty. When we take a look at this block, at first it seems like we would just take our piece here and applique a piece, and then applique these pieces. But when you look at this, there are a lot of tiny little points, and that is a bear to try to applique. So we're going to do a little bit of a different method, and I'm going to kind of walk you through it as we go. Initially, just so you kind of get the setup. So what we're going to be doing initially is cutting our background to be a little bit larger than what we need. So since this is 5 inches unsewn, we'll probably do about 5.5 inches. And then we're going to use a dryer sheet or interfacing and put it right side over the print and sew around this outer flower section. And then we'll turn it inside out to get that whole flower shape, and then applique these melon pieces on, which will be a lot easier than trying to applique these tiny little points. I don't think I would ever be able to do that. So if that sounds a little confusing, it's okay. We're going to go through it step by step. For my fabric choices today, I'm using as my main fabric this really pretty yellow, which I think will look really nice in that, especially in that center part of that block. And then, as always, my background is my muslin fabric. For my first step on this block, I've taken some sewn-in interfacing and I've just traced the very outside of this outline of, it's kind of like a flower. So I've just traced just that outside line. So then I will take this interfacing and I'm going to get my fabric right side up of my print and then pin my interfacing right over that. I'm going to make sure also that I'm leaving enough room on the fabric to give me 1/4 of an inch. In looking at my interfacing, I'm a little close on the edge of the interfacing, so just be really careful. You do want just a little bit more of leeway than what I've got on there. I am just using what I have on hand. I haven't used sewn-in interfacing in probably a couple of decades, so I'm surprised I even had this little piece in here. Okay, that's all pinned, and now I'm going to just stitch right on that drawn line all the way around. All right, I've stitched around on the stitching line, and then I cut out my fabric 1/4 of an inch roughly from that stitching line all the way around. In each corner, I also snipped right up to the stitching line. So when I open that up, you can see there are just a few little threads from that stitching line. You don't want to get too close. And I did that on each of those. Now, I accidentally did not hit record on the last one, so it's already been cut. But with your interfacing, or if you use a dryer sheet, pull it away from your fabric and cut just that interfacing. You don't cut your fabric, because now what we're going to do is turn this right side out. And that interfacing just helps to give that nice seam. We use the interfacing because it's light. I mean, you could do it with any kind of fabric, muslin or anything like that, but then it'll start to get pretty thick. So I'm just pressing it out with my finger around each of the curves, and I'm going to get my iron and I'm going to press this down. I now have this piece of muslin, which is my background, cut at about 5.5 inches. And I'm going to place this flower just right in the center of that. And if you're not sure of how to find the center, a really easy way is to fold it in fourths. So you fold it in half and then half again, and just finger press it. You don't need to have a big pressing. But then that gives you the cross lines. You can see it in the folds. It gives you the cross lines of where to line up your flower. So I can see my cross lines are coming out here at these points and then at these points. So now this piece is down, and I'm going to just pin it on and applique around the outside. Now, if this starts to feel like it might be too thick, before you start stitching this down, you could just cut away the interfacing that's on the back, because all of this was doing was giving it stability for being able to churn the fabric easily. So if you feel like it's going to be too thick, then you can cut that away, because then we are going to be appliquing some melons on top of this. So we have one more layer of fabric that'll be right on these sections here. One tip when you are pressing your flower, you want to make sure to really push out these curves so you don't lose that shape. I'm finding that I'm losing my shape just a little bit in the corners, so I will probably try to applique these just slightly inside to get just a little bit more of a point at each of these points here. This center flower shape is now all stitched down and pressed, and I'm ready to move on to the next section. Now the next part that we're going to be working on is this melon shape that is repeated in all 4 of these little corners. So I'm going to make a template of the melon and get some muslin and cut that melon shape out. This is my template that I've drawn of the melon shape, and it's not really a true melon in that there is just a slight difference. This section that is on the outer part pointing toward the outside of the block is a little bit flatter than this side of the melon. So I made a little arrow to mark which way is on the outside so I don't get confused. It will make a difference. So let me show you here on this block. If I put my melon shape down in this way, you can see how much of this outer section is being cut off because it's just too much of a curve. But when I turn it the proper way, I've got my point here in this corner, my point in this corner, I've got a much better crescent shape here on this block. So what I'm going to do is cut out 4 pieces of this melon from the muslin, making sure that I have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all around it. I've cut out 4 melon shapes, and you can see I have my stitching line drawn. I'll actually be stitching just inside that. On the melon, I've also made a line that is corresponding with the line that was on the template. Now what I'm going to do is prep this for stitching into my other block. And what I'm just going to do is finger press all around the melon, having my stitching line be folded just out of sight. So I'm just going around. I'm not making a huge crease in here. I don't want anything permanent. But what this is going to do is it's actually going to make things a little bit easier when I start stitching my applique. Okay, let's go get this on the block. I have my melon pinned to my block just at the corners. So what I did was just took my fabric, I folded it under, folded that corner in, and folded that under. So I just have that point. And then I lined that point up with where the point is on this little flower shape. So I've got that right there, and I'm pinning this point right in. I just have the 2 points pinned in because I'm going to use my needle then to stitch this down as I go. And you can see that this fabric is automatically trying to fold under just a little bit. So that is where that pre-pressing it with my fingers is going to make it a little bit easier. I have one of my melons stitched down, and now I'm going to put my other one down. But I wanted to show how you can just kind of make these fit. So I'm going to take one end, and I've made my point. I'm going to pin that corner right on there. So I've got that pinned in place. It's a little thick there. There we go. Now, I'm going to adjust this so that this point will be where it needs to be. If I just started stitching, my point would be way off. I need to have it right down here. So I'm going to also on this side fold under the corners right on those stitching lines like I did with the other side. So now I've got a nice point there, and I know my point is going to be right here at the dip in this little flower pattern from the main fabric. Okay, so I'm going to pin that in there. So now I have 2 points in here, and this is where I want my beginning and my end on each curve to go. You can see I kind of have it bumped up here. It's a little bit of it's just curved a little, or it's a little bit of an excess. So I'm just unpinning it just a little bit to adjust. There. Now, as I'm sewing around, I'm going to get my nice point there. This will fold under, create a nice point, and they will match where they need to go. So I'm going to do that with each one. As I pin it down, I'm going to pin each point so that I can get these little melon shapes to be where they need to be. I've gotten all the melons stitched down, and you can see how nicely they look without having to worry about these tiny little parts that look like they could have been appliqued on the colored fabric. But putting these melons on there just really makes it much easier to applique that down. So then I'm going to line up my little ruler, and you can see I've got the line going right through the center of this piece, and I'm ready to get that trimmed. So let me trim that, give this a nice press. There we have our completed block. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, using this method for the interfacing to turn that main part of the fabric, and then also adding those applique melons. It made a block that looked like it could have been very confusing or very difficult to get those points, and it made it a much easier block to complete. So I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of creating block I-5, also called Maria's Majesty. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, or you can send me an email at soitseemscreations@outlook.com. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can also click that notification bell to be notified each time I upload a video, which is generally every Monday. This is Veronica Johnson with Sew It Seems, and I'll see you next time.